there was a video there, and this is part of, it's okay. Production team's gonna go crazy, and they're gonna start moving stuff around. Hey, thanks for being here. If you have your sermon notes, the good news is I've practiced this, so we're good. It might take them a minute, but they'll get it up and running. If you have your sermon notes, you can follow along. Today we are in a series called Breathing Room. We started it a few weeks back. We had to miss last week, and so we are jumping back into part 2 of this series called Breathing Room. And I showed you a photo, if you remember, and the first photo I showed you was a picture of a really packed, crowded closet. Do you remember this? Some of you might remember this. If you're new with us, just imagine for a moment a really packed, crammed closet and where you couldn't fit anything in. And some of you are like, wait, that's my closet. Yeah, I know how that feels. Anybody have a packed closet? Like you're just like, yeah, or you have the junk drawer. Anybody have a crammed junk? Oh, there it is. Thank you, production team. So good. All right. So, crowded closet, jammed in, crowded closet. And for some of you, that is what your closet looks like, or maybe your car or your trunk of your car looks like. And that's okay, I guess, if that's kind of your thing. But what's not okay is when your calendar looks like that, or when your finances look like that, right? Or just your life looks like that. Right? And so that's what this whole series is all about. Because we all know life is better, we say with Breathing Room, but look at this. Oh, man. Right? Like, yes. Wow, yes, right now. Some of you are like, gosh, we got to call somebody. We got to do that. And is that even possible? Some of you are thinking, can I even have breathing room in my life, in my money, and my finances, the whole thing? Yes, you can have breathing room. That's what this whole series is all about. And here's what we all know about breathing room. Life is better with breathing room. It is. And so what we're talking about in this series, and here's what breathing room is, just as a reminder, kind of bring us back to part 1. It's the space between our current pace and our limits. It's the space between your income in and then your expenses as they go out. It's the space in that. It's the space in your calendar and then your actual time. It's the difference of those two things in your relationships. And these things affect our whole life. And so we know this happens for all of us as far as when it comes to our limits. We all know this because it's happened to some of you, it's happened to me, it's happened to our spouses. When we live at our limit, eventually we hit our limit. And here's what happens when we hit our limit. This is why this whole series is so important, because whenever you hit your limit, you know what you do? You do what I do, you do what you do, you just drop everything, right? You just leave everything behind, and all of a sudden somebody else has to pick up all that you dropped behind. And if you're at a workplace, you know what that feels like when somebody just quits abruptly, right? They just quit abruptly, and all of a sudden everything else falls on the whole staff's shoulders, right? You get that because somebody hit their limit. 3 things happen as a result when we hit our limits, and we've all felt these things before. Our stress levels go up, right? Our relationships suffer. We get more snappy with people. We're like yelling at people, and they're like, I wasn't even yelling at you. But just all of a sudden it comes out, and ultimately we said our faith suffers. And the reason your faith and my faith suffers is because all of a sudden reading the Bible begins to feel like a chore. Showing up to a group during the week feels like no way impossible. Can't even accomplish one time in 12 months to show up and hang out with friends. Like I can't do it, And just faith suffers. All kinds of things suffer as a result whenever we hit and live at our constant limit. Right? This is the whole thing. And so oftentimes we said that the reason that we hit our limit, this is what happens. Why our calendars, why all things get packed so hard, why we spend so much money and all this stuff goes on, is because of a couple of reasons as it relates to fear. We'll put them back up. This is all just to remind you. A fear of missing out. You fear missing out, so you say yes to everything and no to nothing. You say yes to everyone all the time. Yes, because you're just a fear of missing out. Fear of falling behind. You put your kids in every single activity, every single thing, because, man, if they just miss one practice, one session, then, oh, my gosh, they'll never make it far, right? Fear of letting down people. You fear of saying no. If I tell them that we're not going to be friends anymore, if we don't go to the house, if we don't go to the birthday party, oh, man, they're going to defriend. They're no more friends. They're just going to cancel us, But we do, right? We think this way. These things happen, yeah. Fear of insignificance, right? Fear of not mattering, fear of not accomplishing that goal that you set for yourself a long time ago. And if you don't hit that goal, then you're insignificant. All kinds of lies can begin to creep in on us and begin to take all of our time and not allow us to breathe. Yeah. And so here's what we all know to be true. Our fears lead us into doing more while pulling us away from doing what matters most. Think about this reality for so many of us. Man, you get trapped into doing so many things. You enjoy nothing, right? You put your kids in so many things, they don't even enjoy anything anymore. They just want to sit at home and play video games. The one thing you don't want them to do because you're having them do everything else. It's like, yeah, so. Just relating to anyone? Silence says yes. And so last week we said, ultimately, or the part one of the series, we said there's a relationship between our willingness to create breathing room and our faith. And we talked about Sabbath, and you can go back to lean in on part one of the series. But we said there's a relationship between our breathing room and our faith. Because ultimately, God invites you. And I don't know if you know this, if you're new to following Jesus, or maybe don't follow Jesus. Jesus actually commanded his followers, those who follow Jesus, to take a full day off. Amen. You're like, I got to start following Jesus. You should. He's a great boss, man. He gives a day off all the time. He's like, no, you got to take this day off. And we said the day wasn't just for resting and sleeping. It wasn't just for resting. It was for also remembering. It was for intentional time to remember all that he has done. In addition to that, we can rest because of all he has done. Right? So good. And today, I want to talk to you about time. Specifically about your calendar. And I titled today, Take Back Your Calendar. I heard a sermon one time years ago, and it changed my life. And the title of that sermon was, Your Calendar is Killing You. And I started to weep right there. I was like, oh my God, that's me. Yes, my calendar is killing me. Yeah, take back your calendar. Here's what we all know as it relates to our time. And this is true for you, it's true for me, everybody. Our time is limited. It doesn't matter if you follow Jesus or don't follow Jesus, if you consider yourself a religious person or not, our time is limited. And because our time is limited, I think we should do something. We should limit what we do with our time. Because your time is limited. I don't know if you know that or not. Yeah, the clock is ticking, bro. Sorry, ladies, the clock is ticking, right? It is. Yeah, our time is limited, so we should really be intentional about what we do with our time, because your time and my time is the most valuable asset you have. That's why I'm genuinely pumped and excited when you decide to join us right here, because I know that you could have been doing so many other things, but you chose to put part of your time here. It's your most precious asset because you can never get any of it back. You can't do anything to earn more or work for more of your time. Time is always moving away. And so the reason we're going to talk about time and spend some time on time today is because you know this is true for your life, it's true for my life. So goes our time, so goes our life. Did you know that your calendar dictates your life? Yeah, like what you put on your calendar actually is a reality of your life. And so as your time goes, so goes your life. So we should think about what we do with our time. And here's what you do and I do typically whenever we get to this point where we're like, oh my gosh, I can't take anymore. I gotta give. We all yearn for, we work hard for. Some of us, we work all year long dreaming of the time we get to take off, right? We can't wait till the weekend. Oh, thank God it's Friday. Yeah, we have a whole phrase for it in America. Oh, thank God it's Friday, because Monday through Thursday's been terrible. Yeah. Take time off. And so here's what we do. We strategize and we spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars trying to get time off, hoping somewhere in that time off, we could get a little bit of breathing room. But then you fly back home and you drive back in. And it's Monday again. And you were gone for 7 days, and that was great. The trip was great. 10 days, 9, it was great. It was fantastic. But it doesn't work. And all of a sudden, the soul goes back to where it was before. And here's the reason, here's the problem. Here's why. Because time off doesn't help when the problem is how we spend our time on. The problem isn't that you don't get enough time off. That's the solution all the time. Just need more time off. No, it's about how you manage your time on. That's the problem. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So the question we're going to ask today is, how then do we create breathing room in our time? And the good news is, well, I'm not going to tell you. But a really wise guy, his name is Moses, he's going to tell us. And he's just he's been a leader a long time, leading hundreds of people, thousands of people, millions of people. So he gets leadership, he gets people. I mean, this guy has seen so many things in his life, and he writes actually a poem. And some might say it's a song. We put it in the book of Psalms in the Bible. If you're not familiar with the Bible, kind of towards right in the middle, there's a book called Psalms, which is like songs or poems. It's like poetry. And Moses writes, most people think about Psalms, they think about David, but Moses writes this psalm, and it's in Psalm 90. And so if you have a Bible app on your phone or something like that, you can follow along. If you don't, no problem. We're going to put it back up on the screen. Here it is. Psalm 90. This is how this guy, Moses, addresses this issue of time, and he gives us some really good advice as it relates to how we can create some more breathing room in our time. And if we follow what he says, I think you'll find and I'll find more breathing room in our time, all right, in our calendar. We'll take back our calendar. All right, so here we go. Here's what Moses writes. He says, Lord, you've been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. All right, so the context of this, lean in on this is really important, just so you get the context of which he's writing this poem. If you were to go and look at a parallel passage, that is you take a chapter in the Bible, or you take some phrase in the Bible like Psalm 90, and you were to go back to Numbers 20. If you're taking notes or somewhere, just write down Numbers 20 on the side. All right, so if you were to go read Numbers 20, you would see the context of which Moses writes this poem. When you read Numbers 20 and then you read Psalm 90, you're like, now I get it. That makes sense in the context of which he was living. Here's what's just occurred in Moses' life that's really important as we unpack the next few verses. His sisters just died. Yeah. He's just sat where some of you have sat before. And he's at a funeral. And so he's reflecting on the things that are important and how short life is. Just like you have done in your life at some point when you go to the celebration of life or you go to a funeral. Gosh, it makes you think, doesn't it? It makes you reprioritize what really begins to matter. This is the context of which Moses writes Psalm 90. All right, so let's lean in on what he says. He recognizes God. You have been around this whole world. Your beginning, your end, your everlasting to everlasting. That means like there's no timetable with you. His perspective is on God. And then he goes in, verse 3, it says, you turn people back to dust. Because there he is sitting, just seen it, just watched it. Return to dust, you mortals. And then he makes the statement that some people pull out of context. He says, 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. He is not being literal. Some people think, oh, like, 1 day, 1,000 days, so 7 days, 7,000 years is creation of time. Okay, don't go there. All right. He's just saying this is like a day. This is poetry, people. It's art. He's saying this is like a day. Like, man, when we see a day, God, you see like 1,000 years. I mean, the time there's no end to you. This is what he's getting at. And then he goes on to say in verse 5, he moves on, yet you sweep people away in the sleep of the death. They're like new grass in the morning. Man, time just so fast. Oh my gosh, they were just here yesterday. Now they're gone tomorrow. This is so quick. In the morning, it springs up new, but in the evening, it is dry and withered. Life is so brief. And there he is, and he's done many funerals in his life because he's been wandering in a desert with millions of people for 40 years. And he's the leader of it all. And so he has seen many people die and turn to dust. And he's just thinking, gosh, how this brings me back to the center of things that really matter. You ever sat at a funeral? You ever sat at a celebration of life? And you think, we got to start investing in our marriage more. We should spend way more time. Oh, gosh, we're wasting so many money on things that don't matter. Yeah, all of a sudden it causes you to reflect. And when you have that mindset, here's what Moses says, and this is so good, such good wisdom. Here's what he says to you, and it's what he says to me. He says, teach us. He tells God, teach us to number our days. 2 words. The word teach indicates something very important to you and me as humans. He says, teach us. You know what that means? I don't do this naturally. Naturally, I think I'm gonna live forever, right? Because you talk to a young person, an adolescent, and they think nothing can get in my way. And you're like, man, you have no idea what's gonna happen when you hit 40 or 30, you know. All right, so teach us, he says, as if to say, God, we don't get this naturally. My inclination is to not number my days. I naturally act as if I have them forever. So teach me how to prioritize my calendar. Tell me how to prioritize my calendar. He says, teach us to number our days. And you know what I know about you? Want to know about me? When it comes to numbering days, you number important days. Oh yeah, you do. If you're a young person in the room, you know the date, hopefully, of your exams. Final exams. You count the days of the last day of school. When it's graduation, you know the number of days until graduation. If you're having a child, you count the days up until the child is going to be born. You count the days for certain celebration. We count the days for our favorite football team to play. I mean, we know the hours, 19 hours more left, and then, they're going to take the field, you know the days that matter to you, and Moses is saying, teach me to number my days. And then he says, and as a result, if God can teach me to number my days, to remember how short life is and how to do this, here's what he says I get as a result. That I'm going to gain not a mind of wisdom, which is an important word there. The word heart in Hebrew speaks to the soul. That there's wisdom available for the soul. It's not just in the mind. God, you can begin to transform my soul because naturally my soul thinks and begins to shape and believe that I'm here at all times and I can just do whatever I want and I'm here forever. But teach my soul to not do this. The soul consists of the mind, but he says, teach my heart that I could gain a heart of wisdom. Oh gosh, if I could learn how to prioritize my calendar, how wise I would be with my time. Yeah, it's good advice. And he wraps up the psalm like this, and he says, Psalm 17 or Psalm 90, verse 17, he says, may the favor of the Lord our God, this is so critical to this whole thing, may the favor of the Lord our God rest on us. And then he says 2 times, he repeats it, establish the work of our hands for us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. Now you say, what is that? This is so critical to the whole thing. This is where I'm going to head to help you understand what he's writing at. When he says establish the work of our hands, here's what he's essentially doing. He's saying, God, I want you to do something. When I take a step back and I look at the brevity of life, and I'm sitting here watching my sister Miriam, and I'm sitting here watching this go down, and I'm sitting here at this funeral, and I'm thinking about who you are, and I'm thinking about my time and how I spend my time. God, here's what I want you to do. I want you to complete everything you want to do through me. I want you to establish, I want you to finish everything you've called me to do. He's recognizing my life is not my own. My life belongs to the everlasting to everlasting. So do whatever you want to do through me for however long I am here. I recognize what's important is not what's here in the physical, it's what's in the spiritual that matters. Eternity matters way more than what I see here. So establish the work of your hands. Don't let me waste my time on me. If I'm going to spend any time here on earth, let me do it serving you. Yeah. Wisdom. This is where Moses is as he writes this. I got a question. What do you do with something you think you have an endless supply of? Shh. You know what you do? When you think you have an endless supply of it, in fact, with the hurricane, some of you just realized this, all of a sudden, you like shortage on gas and shortage on things. You know what you do when you think you have an endless supply of gasoline? You do this. You waste it. You take off a little faster because who cares, man? I got extra. But when you have no gasoline, you're like, we're all going slow, baby. Anybody recognize 54? A little slower. Now it's starting to pick back up, right? Pumps are back on. Here we go. This is what we do. When you think you have an endless supply of something, you waste it. Yeah, when you have an endless supply of money, people say, hey, if I won the lottery, I'd give to all the charities. No, you wouldn't. You'd waste it. Oh, you would so waste it, and you would waste it really well and really fast. Yeah. You waste it. It's what we do when we have an endless supply of something. But you know what we do when we have a limited time or a limited resource? We conserve it, right? We conserve it. When you had a little water in your pantry, a little toilet paper, you're like, one sheet, all right? Because we don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, you're cracking one egg in the morning. I went to Publix just yesterday, no eggs. You got a farm, let me know. I need some eggs. But you think about it, you think about that, how true that is. So let's go pull it back in. It was a little humor, a little fun, but let's pull it back in. Remembering our time is limited provides us with wisdom to know how to spend our limited time. Your time is limited. So think about how you spend your time. In fact, a guy named Paul who writes over half the New Testament, a guy named Paul, he chimes in on this to a group of people in Ephesus, and here's what he says in the context of time. And Paul certainly would have been aware of Psalm 90, likely would have read it, likely would have understood it. Here's what he kind of echoes and supports in Ephesians chapter 5. He says, look carefully how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise people. He says, making the best use of your time, because the days are evil. He takes this whole idea of time and he puts it into the principle of evil. Like, what does your time have to do with evil? And Paul would say, everything. Yeah, he says the days are evil. In other words, this whole world you live in isn't just physical. There is a spiritual element to it, and I need you to see it and understand it so that you can spend your time wisely. Therefore, do not be foolish. Don't be unwise. But understand, look what he says, what the Lord's will is. Look at the will of the Lord. Look at what does the will of God have to do with my time? And Paul would say, everything. He would say, whenever you want to look at your time, hey, God, what is your will for my life so I know how to spend my limited time? So wise. This is what Paul gets at, and he says, and by the way, just real quick thing on time, when he uses this word, making the use of time, you'll see different translations. Some translations will say, make the most of every opportunity. There's two ideas of time in Greek culture. One was time, like hour, minute by minute, day by day, this idea of time. There's also the time, like a time of a marriage, a time of a wedding, a time of a funeral, a time of a moment, a time that something's going to occur. In this context, he is speaking to the time, not day by day, moment by moment. In other words, follow me, try to lean in on this teaching part to this. This is so important. When he says make the most use of your time, he's not saying, hey, use your day wisely, although that's great advice. He's leaning in on make the use of the time. What time? You are in the last days. The last days. I'm not saying Jesus is coming back tomorrow. What I am saying is he is returning soon. I don't know when, but he said soon. So I'm just going to say what he said, soon. And I don't know when that is going to be, but his point is we are in this period of time before Jesus returns. So live like that. Live with that in mind. Make the most use of the time before I come back. Now, how would you spend your time? If you knew Jesus was coming back tomorrow. Yeah. Wow, how wise we would spend our day if you knew Jesus was coming tomorrow. How differently you might spend your day. In fact, all of you are going to call and work tomorrow. Hey, I can't make it. Jesus might come, so not showing up. Yeah, I know. This is what he's trying to get you to lean on, though, real practically. How would you spend your day today if you knew he's coming back tomorrow? Jesus actually chimed in on the same exact topic about time, and here's what Jesus said according to his calendar. If Jesus were putting the calendar together, here's what he said. I don't know, having documentation, he ever put a calendar together, okay, but this is his calendar. Seek first the kingdom of God. Actually, he did in creation 6 days anyways, and then 7th day he rested. So seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you. Here's what Jesus said. I'm so convinced of this. If Jesus were putting your calendar together to get real practical, you know the first thing he would do? He'd start with your day off because he commanded it. The first question I think Jesus would ask us today, and I think it's fair to say, and I said I think, so this is just my opinion, but I think it's a fair opinion. When's your day off to spend time with me? Got one? If you don't, get one. Notice I said spend time with me. You know, even the scriptures say, don't neglect meeting together. He would say, when do you gather with the flock? When do you gather with people and celebrate and get together, encourage one another? When do you do that? Can we start there? Don't end there. If you're a Jew, by the way, in which Jesus was a Jew growing up, do you know when the day starts? At night. The day for a Jew starts when the sun goes down. In other words, here's some strategic things. This just gets real practical before we jump into the final whole point of this, all right? Actually, let's go to the next line, and I'll give you some practical tip here, just for calendar, kind of the whole point of today. Calendar in ways today that leads you to live for the Lord tomorrow. Calendar in ways today to live for the Lord tomorrow. All right, this is just a statement that I would love for you to adopt as you think about your time in your calendar. Because if we live with wisdom, if we take Moses' advice and Paul's advice and even the advice of Jesus, okay, I mean, it's just like, let's look at the Lord first as you think about your calendar. So, in order to live today, right, in ways that lead us to live for the Lord tomorrow, I'm going to calendar in ways today to live for the Lord tomorrow. So, with that in mind, if you want to live for the Lord tomorrow, what does your calendar look like today? Right? Sometimes the calendar gets so claustrophobic, so full, you don't even have time to live for the Lord today or tomorrow. In fact, it's one of the first things to go for most people. I don't have time. Right. I heard a line one time from a guy named Donald Miller in a really cool book called Blue Like Jazz, and he made this statement that the greatest pull of the enemy is to get you to waste your time. That it wasn't like always spiritual things and demonic things, it was just get you to waste your time because your time is limited. Yeah. So, practical tip for calendar. If I were putting a calendar together and I thought about bringing up a whiteboard, and then I thought about putting a chart up on the screen, and then I thought, you know what we should really do? We should tap into what we all use as our calendar, our phone. So if you want to follow along and just kind of do this little thing, go ahead. You can grab your calendar out if you grab some kind of calendar device, and you can just start looking at your calendar right now. You can just here it is. You can participate online right where you are. Unless you're driving, then do it later, okay? So get your calendar out, and you click on a button, and you look at your schedule, and I just want to ask you, do it when you get home if you need to. Where's your time to rest and remember? And if you're a Jew, this is how they would do it. They would start it at night. Did you know your next day begins with how you end your previous day? You don't believe me? Try to go to bed at 4 a.m. And then wake up at 7 for the meeting. How'd you do? How'd you feel? The day starts when the sun goes down. The day begins at night. The reason why some of us have so cram-packed days and cram-packed schedules is because we try to take our breathing room until 1 a.m. and then we can't breathe. Yeah. Start the day at night. It begins with how you end your day, right? Yeah. Second, just real practical. Choose the time for the Lord in your day and carve it out. Put it in your calendar. Time to read and time to pray. And believe it or not, you actually have the time to pray. Oh boy, because you do when you need something, when that sale needs to happen, you come through on prayer every single time. When that person needs healing, you're like, Jesus, is that your name? Jesus, I think. Jesus, God, whatever. Big guy, help. Yeah. So do this. Come on, let's be honest. Stop saying. You go to the next slide. Stop saying you don't have time. Start saying you don't make the time. Stop saying you don't have time to take your wife on a date. Stop it. Don't say the next half to her, okay? Just say it to yourself. Seriously, though, stop saying you don't have time to tuck your kid in at night. Stop. Don't do that. Be honest with yourself. You don't make the time because you have no breathing room in your life. And just going to kiss them goodnight up the stairs feels so draining. If that ever happens to you, reset. Count your number. Count the days. Count the days. Teach us, Moses would say. Teach us, because I don't do this naturally. Teach me to number my days so that I could gain some wisdom of the things that really matter. Oh, how wise we would be. Teach us to take the time where it matters. This is, by the way, real personal to me. My calendar gets full, just like all of your calendars gets full, and I am not perfect at this at all, okay? Let me just say, this has happened this week. Every time I'm preaching on a sermon, I'm like, okay, Jesus, I hear you, right? He's talking to me too, and I kind of get the point. So the other day, we're driving in a car. I mean, we had nowhere to go. We're just driving. And one of my kids, I don't even know, I have too many kids, but 4 kids, and I forget which one it is. It was one of them. One of them did this. And so we're driving in the car, and they were asking an explanation for something, and I forgot what it was. Like, I don't know if it was the word redeem or it was some word, and they go, "What does that mean?" And internally, I was like, "Nothing." And then I had this moment of like, are you so busy right now, Ricky, that you can't just explain a word to the person? And so I had this like internal check. This all happened in a car. Like, we're not doing anything. I'm not, we're just. And that's when I was like, well, I'll explain. So I kind of paused and I gave explanation to the meaning of the word, and they're like, oh, okay. And in that very moment, I was like, wow. Like how I lack breathing room. I can't even take the time to just explain something to my child. And it's just so much easier to say, not right now. Goodness. Anybody ever? No, just me. It's okay. All right. I need help. It's all for me. That's all good. So, a couple questions to ask you, then we're going to send you home. You can follow along. And if you're in a small group, one of our groups, okay, these are the questions that you're going to talk about within your group settings too. And so you can fill this out now. And I encourage you to do it just to be honest and kind of apply this whole thing and hopefully find it to be helpful. All right, so here's what I want you to do. Here's the homework for you. And if you're a couple, you're married, maybe you can do it separately, or if you need to do it together, okay, whatever that may look like for you. But if you want to take today and then kind of like really put it into your life, which makes all the difference, because Jesus said, don't just listen to what, people say, like do what the word says. All right, here's what you can do. Just ask yourself these questions. What should I add? Come on, what do you need to add? All right, I need to add, I've got to get time in with Jesus. I've got to take time to say goodnight to the kids. I've got to take time to pray with my family. I've got to take time to go on a date or have that lunch or whatever. I've got to take time. What does that look like for you? I don't know what that looks like for you, but fill it in. I encourage you to fill it in. What should I add? What should I subtract? And by the way, this may not be a thing. It may be a person. All right, you might need to look at what I should subtract, and you're like, yep, I'm writing her name in right now. Subtract her, subtract him. That meeting, I'm taking out that meeting. I'm no longer going to do that one, right? I'm changing that one in a work environment, whatever it might look like. What should I increase? Where do you need to have increase in your life? Time with, right? What does that look like? Alone time? bathtub time, shower time, gym time. I mean, I don't know, walk time. My wife, for her, she's just getting outside. That's her thing. Needs to increase walking outside. Sounds good to me, right? That's her thing. So think about things you need to increase, and then what should I decrease? What should I do less of? I gotta start doing less of this. Write these things down, and by the way, don't try to conquer your whole life and whole world. Just do one of each. Even if you just do one of these, so good, right? Just get a little bit better, so good. And then I invite you to do this week. I invite you to pray. And if you don't follow Jesus, I want to invite you to still say this prayer anyways. Invite him in. I mean, if you like to, invite him in. I encourage you. If you follow Jesus, then you should do this because it's what Jesus said to do. Right? So that's a no-brainer. Here's what Jesus said to do because it's in his word he wrote, so we get it. Teach me to number my days so that I may gain a heart of wisdom. What would your life look like this week if you just stepped back before writing out your calendar this week and you said, Jesus, teach me to number my days so that I could gain a heart of wisdom. Teach me. Show me the calendar in such a way. This is so important. You've got to lean in on this one and don't let anything distract you on this part. Teach me to number my days in such a way that you could do all you want to do through me. Just imagine if each of us put our calendar before Jesus and said, Jesus, organize my calendar in such a way that I would be available to you whenever you want. Wow. Do you know what happens most of the time? He's the first to go. Not just time with him, but doing the things that he calls you to do. It's the first thing to scratch off your list. Things to do. If that's you, come back to some breathing room. Allow Jesus to fill in your calendar in a way that you can live for him. Imagine what would happen for you. Imagine what would happen for him if we begin to live this way. You can put it up. Imagine living in a way that today leads you to live for the Lord tomorrow. Imagine living in a way today that leads you to live for the Lord tomorrow. Maybe, just maybe, your day would look a little different. Maybe your calendar would look a little different. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you for wisdom, teaching us. And so here it is, a little bit of moment. You can just say right now, Jesus, teach me to number my days that I might gain heart of wisdom. All right, one more time in case you missed it, in case you were a little too busy. Here we are. Jesus, teach me to number my days that I might gain heart, wisdom, that I might do the things that are way more important than things that I think are important. So teach me what really matters. Nudge me what really matters. Remind me what really matters. You're everlasting to everlasting. Thank you, Jesus, for your grace. Amen. There's a cool story I'll share with you. It's like 2 seconds. I got 2 more minutes, so I'm going to take it. 11:15 is my downtime. I just set a record for myself, so here we are. A rabbi once was looking at some of his Jewish students, and he was in a class, and he comes in, and he puts down a glass jar, and he takes these bigger rocks, and he puts them in this jar. And he asked the students, is it full? And they all said, yeah, it's full because it was overflowing with bigger rocks. And they said, yeah, it's full. And then he took some smaller, like pebbles of rocks, and he pours it in, kind of shakes it and shakes it and shakes it, and gets it all the way there. And he says, is it full? To which the class responded, well, definitely now, yes, it's full. And then he takes some some very fine sand, and he begins to sprinkle it in, shakes it and sprinkles it in, shakes it and sprinkles it in, which the students are like, okay, it's full now. He says, yeah, it's full now. But then he says, what would have happened if I started with the sand? The student says, wouldn't have time for more important things. That's right. So go live that way. Don't allow small things to get in the way of the most important things. You're dismissed. We love you. God bless you. If you need anything from us, we are here. We'll be down front. Take care. We'll see you next week.